And altogether, one should remember that the Palestinians are not going to declare a state. This is a misperception which is growing too fast. What is going to happen at the UN is the Palestinians will ask the entire world to recognize potentially that the Palestinian state will eventually be declared by them. They say that it will be declared through negotiations. So I presume that the recognition will take place. Maybe the Americans will go against it, but they cannot veto it at the General Assembly. But that the overwhelming majority of approximately 130 states will say yes. And then I hope that Israel eventually will come into its sense, our government, and will continue negotiations towards eventually two-state solution based on 67 borders. And then when the state will be declared, violence will not take place because it will be a result of negotiations. But if there won't be any negotiations, the Palestinian sentiment will grow, and eventually we won't see this stability as we have seen until today, because the continuation of the occupation cannot be sustained forever.
All right, just following up on that, how far is Israel willing to go, do you think, to prevent Palestine's independence and admission to the UN? I mean, there's such a lot of build-up towards this. Can we expect a new armed conflict?
Well, I think that the interest of Israel should have been to raise our vote and add it to others in favor of a future declaration of a state. But I think that the composition of the current coalition of the government, the situation on the ground with our social justice movement, etc., is weakening the ability of the government to move on. So I think that we might have a warm autumn, and
can we just check? I still have one more question. I think we had a bit of a sound problem there, but I do want to ask you quickly. The U.S. is likely to veto Palestine's independence bid, although earlier you were mentioning that they cannot. But even though most of the other UN member states are expected to support it, if the U.S. does veto, where do you see Palestine going from there?
Well, the United States cannot veto a General Assembly resolution. They can only veto a Security Council. So the Palestinians will be wise enough not to go to the Security Council, but eventually to limit themselves to the Assembly, and then the Americans will either abstain or will go against it, but it won't mean anything. But the fear of the Palestinians is that the Americans will actually also try to limit the assistance, the aid, the money, the relations, etc. And by weakening the relations between the PLO and the Americans, the Palestinians might suffer. But I presume that the Americans will maybe go against it. The Palestinians will move forward because we are speaking about national identity. But I can only hope that both sides will not try to deteriorate the situation, and the Americans will understand that this is actually only a symbolic act which won't change anything on the ground.
All right, thank you very much for your insight there. Dr. Ron Pundak, the chairman of the Palestinian-Israeli Peace NGO Forum. Thank you.